If you run a company or manage a team, hiring qualified people quickly can make or break your business. Imagine a position of need going unfilled for weeks or even months because you just can't seem to find the right candidate. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. Indeed sponsored jobs help you stand out and hire fast. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so you can reach the people you want faster. This makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Plus, there's no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts. You only pay for results on your job post. Just in the last minute that I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. Now that is fast. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. Listeners will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/BWN. Go to Indeed.com/BWN right now to support this podcast. Indeed.com/BWN. Terms and conditions apply.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Monday night, February 10th, 2025, as we record this new episode. The offseason is officially over as pitchers and catchers begin reporting to spring training camps. Our beat reporter, James Fegan, is on his way down to Arizona covering the Chicago White Sox camp for us, in large thanks to our wonderful Sox Machine Patreon supporters. In this episode, we preview the White Sox spring training camp, which once again features a new manager in charge with Will Venable. What are the biggest storylines to track during spring training? Can the front office rebuild start helping to unlock results on the field? And what to make of the position battles? There are very few mainstays with this White Sox roster, which does make it interesting once spring training games start, and who actually makes the opening day 26-man roster. But we'll try to make our best guesses on the key position battles in early February. Joining me is the Sox Machine managing editor, it's Jim Margulis. And hello, Jim. Welcome to 2025 spring training. Once again, with a new manager. Does this camp feel any different, Jim, heading in with Will Venable in 2025 versus 2023 under Pedro Grifol?
I guess we'll find out throughout spring training, because with Grifol, part of it was, yes, new sheriff in town trying to get the most out of a team that was 500 and needed to get over the hump, but also he was all about attention to detail and making spring training more efficient, no dead time. Really big about that. I think we've seen with Chris Getz that, he's taking the approach, there are no quick fixes. And he's really stressed that. It's really all he has to stress when you lose 121 games, but he's been all about making big player development changes. We're making big research and development changes. We've, boosted our analytics staff. We are changing the way we're relaying information, getting all sorts of equipment. So if that holds, then you're not going to see Will Venable and Walker McKinven and everybody else saying that, we're going to whip these guys into shape. It's going to be more of, I think, probably a softer spring training, more holistic spring training, and probably upbeat. Empathy was what was stressed at the winter meetings. So I don't think you're going to see like an ass kicker come in and say, like, we got to do things this way. We didn't see a guy bust down the first base line, get out of here. It's probably going to be more of what we saw a little bit in 2024, which was a whole bunch of veterans coming in with no room to slack off because this could be their last major league contract. Young guys playing for their first year, maybe their best opening day assignments. And, a case of like Miguel Vargas, like he probably has to show up and play pretty well. A lot of guys like those who are, can't afford to waste an opportunity. And then I think Venable will probably take a softer, harder to pin down approach, in that he says a lot of things that sound good, but also like, I don't think you're going to see like a whole lot of, standards or like things you can really pin them down on when it comes to like, we're going to be like this by May, or we can't afford to see any of this. I think it's going to be probably more player focused, more individual checklists, and Venable is going to be like the guy to try to see those through.
Yeah, if you're hoping for a fire and brimstone type of manager, that's what Chicago sports fans love, Jim, right? They love the fire and the passion. That's what they're looking for. I'm not saying Will Venable is not a passionate guy. I think he clearly is about the sport of baseball, and he's passionate about taking this job with the Chicago White Sox and trying to make them better. But I don't think he's going to be super strict, to your point. I don't think he's going to be stern over these guys. To your point, at the winter meetings, the line that still stays with me, leading with empathy. So if guys are struggling, if Miguel Vargas is really struggling, like halfway through March, you may see that empathy kick in for Will Venable, even knowing that it's not looking good for Miguel Vargas to make the opening day roster, which means he's going to get cut by the White Sox, that Vargas should not lose all hope as far as being a professional baseball player. So I think we could see that type of focus from Will Venable, and it'd be interesting to see as we covered the spring training games, we get closer to opening day, how he wants his 26-man roster to look like, especially coordinating efforts with Chris Katz, because Will Venable doesn't have 100% control, Jim, of what that 26-man roster is going to look like. So that's why, like, it is, for me, a lot different. But again, it is a first-time manager, and we are trying to learn in what Venable actually brings to the table, because it's no longer press conferences.
Yeah, I think the bigger change is going to be not so much manager focused, but more along lines of who isn't there anymore. And that's Yoan Moncada, Eloy Jimenez. They've been around for a long time, like Moncada since 2017, Jimenez since 2018, probably since 2021, when you had Moncada coming back from COVID and Jimenez tearing his pec on the outfield wall, where their health became like an annual, either just, you had to watch every single sprint to see if they started wincing, or if they're going to be able to make it through an entire week of games. Like, that's when it just became like high alert all the time. And I'm curious if for all the talk about soft tissue injuries that we've seen, Tim Anderson, Luis Robert's obviously still there, so he's like the last one. But I'm curious whether there's going to be any change of feel, just because, are they going to be healthy? Luis Robert aside, is really no longer the predominant storyline. And now it's just about, the new guard, Colson Montgomery, Vargas, Brian Ramos, young pitching staff. That should, I think, be refreshing to have these new things to focus on versus old things to dwell on. And we'll see how long that lasts in terms of like providing a change of pace. And, if they struggle too, probably won't be enough to make anybody feel better, but it will be different.
So let's talk about the biggest storylines going into spring training. And I could start, Jim. The number one spring training storyline for me is Luis Robert Jr. And quite frankly, that goes through the first half of the regular season for the Chicago White Sox, because it really does feel like he's getting dealt. He could be dealt during spring training. Chris Katz is no stranger to making a big trade during camp. He did it with Dylan Cease last year. It was close to the middle of spring training camp before he traded Cease to San Diego. I don't know how likely it is if Robert gets dealt during spring training. A major injury would have to happen for a contending team, or a team hoping to contend in their outfield, in order to meet the asking price for Chris Katz. But how does Robert look trying to bounce back from a really rough season, continuing to work with his hitting instructor? It was a great feature story that James wrote on Sox Machine. Definitely check that out. And what kind of focus or renewed focus from Robert in his performance on the field? Because again, it's that Kenny Williams line, Jim. You're just not trying to impress the Chicago White Sox. You're trying to impress, I don't know, I wouldn't say all 30 teams, but at least 15 teams that kind of think they could make the playoffs this year. That's where Luis Roberts' head's got to be at.
Yeah, I associate that line, funnily enough, with Zach Collins. Like when, the writing was on the wall where like he wasn't going to be the catcher of the future anymore. And like he was running out of options. Grandal and McCann were there, and just, he was more about, it's not going to be here. So where is it going to be? It's going to be a big one. I think unlike Dylan Cease last year, hard to imagine him being dealt in spring training. Like it doesn't feel like it could be, perhaps like an injury happens and Robert looks good and that forces a team to pony up and beat another team to acquiring Roberts, in June or July, whenever that happens. But I don't know, the Dylan Cease trade, the way that's unfolded so far, didn't inspire a lot of confidence for trading in the middle of spring training and trading other teams' prospects who, maybe they see him in spring training and be like, I'm not sure if Jairo Iriarte looks like we want him to look. I think we can part with him. That's my fear, I think, with going into spring training and dealing Roberts after a team has had a couple weeks to look at their own guys and figure out which ones are expendable. So I think that I would rather see the White Sox go into the regular season with him, especially since there isn't that, he's got team options remaining. The White Sox have a whole lot of payroll space that they can devote to paying him should he play well. So it isn't just a cheap leverage ploy to say, oh, we're going to hold on to him for as long as we have to get the deal we want. So I'm hoping that Robert shows up and that there isn't like a daily will they, won't they, because it doesn't feel like now is the time based on the players reported to be, discussed in trades for Robert. Like not enough to pull the trigger. It really seems like only if you feel like you're going to be selling lower 4 months from now, but that's kind of how I see it.
So what's the biggest storyline for you this spring training for the White Sox?
Aside from, Will Venable, Walker McKinven, the new coaching staff, Ryan Fuller, et cetera, seeing what they do. Looking forward to that stuff from James. Probably Colson Montgomery, just shortstop, I guess, but really about Montgomery. Now he's a somewhat divisive prospect. He was off Keith Law's top 100 list, and I'll be talking to him later this week for a podcast, our annual chat about Keith Law's list, just talking about, I guess that the late September surge and the Arizona Fall League performance that Montgomery put forth didn't really change his mind at all. So I am curious I guess I see what Law is saying in terms of the looks I've seen Montgomery the last two times have been unimpressive. When I saw him in Nashville last year, he looked like an old player. He looked like he was 33, just because he was only swinging at pitches he could drive and really just looking to pull the ball. And that just reminds me of like Frank Thomas with the bad ankle. Like I'm only going to be looking at pitches I can rip because walks are worthless or singles are worthless. So I'm going to look to rip the ball and, not seeing that really, a dynamic hit tool that could hit pitches that weren't in his ideal zone. So I want to see a different Montgomery myself, just to cleanse the palate a little bit, but also just to see like why the White Sox are so high on him, because like I would hope that this new administration would be one that would really have to see a different Montgomery, see the data, see the way his bat is going through the zone, see him driving pitches that he didn't drive last year to be able to change minds. But some of the people here were the people who were fine with Oscar Colas being plan A in November, rather than looking for right field upgrades. So we've seen the White Sox do this before, where they just press the guy into a starting role for no real reason that's evident to the outside. And it turns out like there is no real reason overall, like the skeptics were right. So that's what I think I'm most curious about here.
Yeah, Montgomery was number 3. I had 3 big storyline. Like, that was my list, and Montgomery was number 3 on my list. Number 2 on my list, can Brian Bannister and Ethan Katz find magic again during spring training? They were able to help Garrett Crochet make that transition. Please do not go back and listen to our podcast a year ago. And during spring training, I sound like an idiot.
Do it. Clip it.
That clearly worked. We all knew that it was going to work. I mean, everybody was advocating that Garrett Crochet should be the opening day starter last year. No, I'm joking, of course. But they were able to unlock something with Crochet. What Bannister saw as far as the offseason lab with Eric Fetty came true. And that really helped as far as the White Sox. In a way, they were able to trade Fetty. But with Fetty and Crochet, at least in the first half of the season, when they're going back to back, you're going to be able to see a little competitive baseball for 5 to 6 innings before things went wayside. Can they do that again? They have Martin Perez. I'm not expecting Martin Perez to be an all-star, but that'd be great. Somebody needs to make the all-star team for the Chicago White Sox. And out of all these young pitchers, can Jonathan Cannon take a step forward? As soon as they figure out what's going on health-wise with Drew Thorpe, can he get some of the velocity back? Is Sean Burke somebody? I mean, he looked like somebody last year. And of course, I've always been a big advocate of Davis Martin. Can he be an average major league starter? That I'm curious to see on the pitching front what Brian Bannister can do, because Crochet and Fetty, talent-wise, Jim, were a step above what Bannister's going to be working with in this camp. But if he's able to unlock anything with any of these guys, at least they should be able to stick around, and that should give a more palatable 2025 season than last year.
Yeah, I think like the headliners are not the headliners. Like, I wouldn't count on Martin Perez replacing Eric Fetty. He seems like he's replacing Chris Flexen. But the younger arms, like the Jonathan Cannon, Sean Burke, even Kai Busch to a certain degree, like assuming his arm is completely back to throwing like 94 or 95 versus like the 92 he was throwing last year, 91. Davis Martin, fully back from Tommy John surgery, normal offseason. The talent that's coming back, it's no longer like Nick Nastrini being like the only guy that they really thought of for being like a prospect to have in the opening day rotation. There's more young pitchers who have something to offer. So yeah, I'm looking forward to those guys, trying to solidify their gains from last year and be just no longer prospects, but just, credible mid rotation starters. Like, even if they're all a bunch of like number 4s, that's fine. Like, every team needs number 4s. So as we saw last year, it's really more about the bullpen and offense scoring runs for them. But like the starting pitchers at the end of last year showed enough to feel like they were something, if not to build around, like not the biggest problem. So I am looking forward to that discussion and watching, James go to work with, talking to Ethan Katz and Brian Bannister and watching bullpen sessions and figuring that out for us. I think I'm looking forward to, setting aside some of the positional battles we'll talk about. It's kind of part of that, but I'm looking forward to seeing the return for Garrett Crochet. I'm looking forward to seeing Kyle Teal, Chase Mydroth, Braden Montgomery, Wickelman Gonzalez, like just all of them. What do they look like? I've seen them in highlights. I've seen their data, but really haven't seen them like playing games, like full at bats live when I don't know what's coming, or just how they respond to pitches, how they drive pitches, like when they go to a StatCast park, like what is their, exit velocities, what their pitch velocities look like. Braden Montgomery, what does he look like against professional competition? Like, that's all going to be fun. I would hope, if not enlightening, help round out some pictures a little bit, especially like as assuming Teal and Caro go down to AAA, and it's going to be Theis and Corey Lee being the starting 2 catchers. Like, just what did we learn from them in spring training to figure out what their expectations are for April in Charlotte and go from there.
The Sox Machine Fantasy Baseball League will be coming back for our Patreon supporters. This will be our 3rd year of having 30 or more teams in the main championship league. But for the first time ever, we are introducing a 12-team roto style and a sub-league that feeds into the 32-team head-to-head league. We have multiple spots available for each league. So if you love playing fantasy baseball and you've always been curious about joining our 30-plus team league, check out the post on patreon.com/soxmachine to learn more about the leagues and how to sign up. If you are not a Sox Machine Patreon supporter, visit patreon.com/soxmachine to sign up today to enter the leagues.
During President's Day savings at the Home Depot, get up to 35% off select appliances. Plus, save up to an extra $450 on select appliances like Whirlpool. Shop the side-by-side fingerprint-resistant stainless steel refrigerator with an indoor can caddy. Or the fingerprint-resistant stainless steel top control dishwasher with 3 5-inch shelves. Make the most of President's Day savings and our lowest prices guaranteed at the Home Depot. How doers get more done. See homedepot.com/price match for details. See store or online for details. Minimum purchase required.
So those are the storylines we're going to be tracking early. Of course, things will change during camp, but those are the things that are interesting to us most. Please let us know in the comments section of the podcast page on soxmachine.com. You guys have been quite chatty as of late. Every time I click on a post, it's 60 or more comments. You guys are having great conversations there. But let us know what other storylines you guys are paying attention to during spring training camp. Now, the White Sox did add more new faces to be part of the competition. You have left-handed pitcher Brandon Eisert. He's been added to the 40-man roster. And then invited on a minor league contracts, Brandon Drury, former second baseman, third baseman in recent years for the Los Angeles Angels, Cincinnati Reds, and San Diego Padres, and infielder Tristan Gray. Gray just seems to be a guy at this point. Maybe will help out, fill out a roster for the Charlotte Knights. But Eisert is another left-handed reliever that Chris Katz has added to the 40-man roster, Jim. Last year we saw Frazier Ellard. Ellard did pitch well against righties, but lefties had quite a bit of success. But I figured that the White Sox would want to get more run to Ellard. But with all the lefties that they have added here, I guess Brandon Eisert, if you're entering camp, you got a chance of making the opening day bullpen.
Yeah, especially since being on the 40-man roster is the big thing. I feel a little bit bad for Trey Mago being like another guy in front of me as I'm trying to jump from off the 40-man to the 40-man and 26-man. Yeah, Eisert's interesting just because I was looking at his track record, 3 full seasons in Buffalo. Wow. Basically he was drafted. Let me see here. So he's drafted in 2019, 18th round, but then, misses the 2020 season. Obviously, I'm not sure if he was part of the alternate training sites, whether he was thought of, but then 2021 speed runs through A ball, high A, double A, full season. And then the next 3 seasons, all in Buffalo, all decent seasons, good, respectable left-handed seasons, better than the strikeout inning, walk rates pretty good, hitability, kind of comes and goes, a little bit homer prone, but has a slider, looks like somebody you might call up. And then finally he gets called up to the Blue Jays in his last of those 3 seasons, but he only pitches 3 games and they're all a month apart. 1 in June, 1 in July, 1 in September. So, he gets claimed by the Rays and then he gets claimed by the White Sox. And it's a case of I imagine some teams were just watching him. Yeah, maybe rot isn't over. Is maybe overstating a little bit, but just somebody man, it'd be nice. I don't want to trade for a Brandon Eisert, but also if the Blue Jays just aren't sold on him, we've watched him. We've been keeping an eye on his data. We like this one pitch he's throwing. We think we can work with him. I could see the White Sox being a team that just felt like he might get dumped at some point and we're looking to pounce. So I think, more than having a grand plan for him, because they have, already added Cam Boozer and Tyler Gilbert alongside Fraser Ellard to the bullpen from the left side. So, Eisert may not be somebody who breaks camp with the White Sox, but just, he's one of those guys who's been in one place for so long. And I imagine other teams have been if he ever comes loose, I want to see what that slider looks like. I want to change his hand position or something like that to see if something plays up a little bit more, because they've just gotten a really long look at him in one place for a long time where he's been decent to good. And I haven't seen many careers like him to where just he's in one. Mago is probably one of those cases, but like in case of Eisert, like 3 straight years, full seasons, no health issues in AAA, and just the Blue Jays being like, yeah, no, we already got guys.
Brandon Drury, for those that recall, back in 2022, when the White Sox were, I guess, kind of in contention, we wanted the White Sox to add at the trade deadline. And I wanted the White Sox to trade for Brandon Drury to help out in the infield. And this was at a time when he already hit 20 home runs in 92 games with the Cincinnati Reds. His OPS was 855. Drury gets traded to San Diego and has a decent second half of the season. In 2023, Drury hit 26 homers with an 803 OPS, very heavy on the slugging, not a high on-base percentage type of hitter. And that was 125 games for the Angels. Last year, the bottom fell out for Drury. A -2 WAR season with the Angels. A career worst season for him. He's now part of the White Sox spring training efforts. He's on a minor league contract. Jim, this is classic dead cat bounce, baby. These are the types of signings that we love that the White Sox are trying here. And I guess in this situation for this team, not in contention, why the hell not? Let's see if Brandon Drury is a dead cat.
It feels like, coming in the same time as Yohan Moncada going to the Angels and Tim Anderson signing with the Angels does feel like a little bit of challenge.
Oh, you take our guys, we'll take your guy.
And just kind of like swapping pawns a little bit. Challenge, not quite a challenge trade, but like challenge development. Like, we'll take your disaster, you'll take our disaster, and we'll see if we can, who wins at the end. Geyer was bad all season. Like, he had a hamstring strain, he had a respiratory issue. So perhaps that's something that, like, he had a cold start and ordinarily he would have been back to like mediocre at the end of the year. But because of these 2 health things that came up, like, that just buried him, and the Angels had a lot else going wrong. Perhaps just the wrong environment for him. But Drury seems like he's, either somebody who can make the roster in like 5 different ways, which I think is probably appealing to a certain degree for the White Sox. If they do have, some shortcomings from the right side in the outfield, or if they want like a platoon guy for a left-handed second baseman, or if they need a DH who just can hit 20 homers and provide that kind of threat. There are ways he can make it. I could also see it being a case where he shows up and his best ball is behind him, and the White Sox have enough guys to play, and he doesn't make it out of spring training. So I saw a lot of, because there was still a bit of name brand recognition. Like, he just completely cratered last year. He was good for the previous 2 years. And for a number of years, I confused him with Brandon Geyer, just because they're kind of from a distance and like multi-position guys who were useful but not great. And then eventually I saw Geyer get hit by enough White Sox pitches, like, oh, he's the guy who just crowds the plate and boosts his OBP by pitches. And then Drury's power took another leveled up and differentiated himself that way to where it could separate them. But Geyer, I think his last professional appearance was with the White Sox in spring training. I think like he had a quick cameo and really didn't pan out. And, who knows, maybe Drury will be the same, and I will confuse them yet again at the very ends of their careers.
Sox Machine, along with their friends from the 108, will once again be hosting Opening Day Eve on Wednesday night, March 26th at the Remova Theater. Located in Bridgeport, the Remova Theater is where we'll host our live podcast previewing Opening Day, making our bold predictions for the 2025 season, and the typical silliness that comes with plenty of #108ing. Doors open at 6 p.m. The show will start at 7:30. Remova will feature new beers from their tap room, and you have to try the terrific food from the Remova Grill. Tickets are $20 plus fees in advance, and it will be $25 day of the event. To purchase tickets for Opening Day Eve, visit this website, removachicago.com/shows, and click on the Opening Day Eve link for March 26th, or you can also click on the purchase link for this podcast post.
Build a routine with Ollie that supports your wellness needs, like getting your daily vitamins and minerals with Ollie's multi-gummies, or keeping your mood upbeat with all the vitamin D in Hello Happy. Give your gut health some support with probiotics, and wake up feeling refreshed after taking Ollie Sleep. Do wellness on your terms. Find Ollie at a Walmart or Target near you or at ollie.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. During tax season, your personal info travels to a lot of places. Between payroll, your tax consultant, and the IRS. If your W-2 gets exposed, that's just the ticket for identity thieves. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it guaranteed or your money back. Don't let identity thieves take you for a ride. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Well, let's talk about the position battles for the Chicago White Sox, and a lot of attention in our coverage of spring training, especially when games are starting, are going to be at these key positions. And on the position player side, it's in the infield. There is no certainty at third base, shortstop, or second base for the Chicago White Sox. We are assuming that Andrew Vaughn is going to be the starting first baseman for the Chicago White Sox. And catcher, I guess, is a debate. But right now, the White Sox did not really add anyone to challenge either Corey Lee or Matt Thaiss. Omar Narvaez, maybe, old friend. Speaking of dead cat bounces, maybe he bounces back and can challenge one of those two for a gig. If he challenges anyone, it might be Corey Lee that he challenges on the roster. But let's start again with your biggest storyline, Jim, at shortstop. It's right now Colson Montgomery. Jacob Amaya's back. If you didn't get that news from last week, Baltimore put him on waivers. The White Sox picked him up, so he's back. And Brooks Baldwin. Now, Chris Katz at Sox Fest did mention Chase Mydroth and Josh Rojas. I'm really not entertaining either of those guys, Jim, as serious candidates for the shortstop position, because when asked about his position preference at Sox Fest, Chase Mydroth said second base. Mm-hmm. So when that's your position preference, I'm just going to assume you know, and everybody else that's watched you knows, you're not a shortstop. And Josh Rojas is just not, that's not his defensive specialty. He gives you defensive boost at third and second base. So Montgomery, Jacob Amaya, Brooks Baldwin, for the third time on this show, this really does feel like Colson Montgomery's job to lose, right, Jim?
It does. I hope it's not like with Mydroth. Yeah, I laughed at that, but also I wonder if he came to the White Sox and they saw like what happened, like Gavin Sheets, like not a right fielder, sank his value. And maybe Mydroth's like, I have to state my preference. Like, I know it's the gamer thing to be able, like, I'll play anywhere. I just want to crack at the roster. But maybe like he's trying to save the White Sox from themselves a little bit and say like, I'm really a second baseman. I'll play shortstop if I have to. I won't complain about it, but just, let's be real here about, where I'm good and where I'll thrive. So we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, it does seem like they want Montgomery to be the guy. Yeah, I mentioned this in my top 10 White Sox prospects. I put for a teaser for those who do not yet support us on Sox Machine for the full list. But I did put Brooks Baldwin 10th just because like I think there's a little bit of development left for him to where like I like him better as a shortstop than a second baseman. I just think like he is more comfortable with the angles and like he can make the throws, like arm strength isn't an issue. I think he can be good or at least, like average. Don't worry about him there. Like if he ever hit well enough to like play enough shortstop, I think you could grow comfortable with him there. So I'm not opposed to him either breaking camp as the shortstop or at least like helping provide some cover for Montgomery, or if Montgomery continues to look rough in spring training, like you don't have to do this, Chris Katz. Like there's another option here. That's kind of how I'm looking at Baldwin, but yeah, I mean, Godspeed, Colson Montgomery. Like I hope that you prove the haters. And I guess like I would be lumped in with those haters since I had him 6th. Just that's me like trusting my own eyes, or at least being like, that's 2 years in a row where I saw him and just like he did not create action. And I want to see him create action. So that's more me just being like, this is what I saw, telling you what I saw. And I'd like to see something different. So hopefully he does provide just a different looking guy, both at shortstop and at the plate. So where if he does open, break camp and opening day and he's a shortstop, it's a worthwhile experiment. Even if you don't feel great about it, like he plays well enough at Camelback Ranch to where you can say, yeah, I kind of see the point. And if it's not working out by mid-May, the White Sox might have options that can you spell him and let him go down to Charlotte and finish whatever he needs to work on.
Yeah, Jacob Amaya doesn't have any options left. So even if he doesn't win the starting shortstop job, he is competing for that super utility backup infielder bench spot for the Chicago White Sox. Brooks Baldwin has 3 options. The White Sox can only send him down to Charlotte. But right now that's your shortstop battle. Second base, a little bit more, I don't want to say jam-packed because talent-wise, I'm not sure how much talent there is, but I guess Baldwin could be considered at second base, Jim. Free agent signing Josh Rojas, Chase Mydra, part of that Garrett Crochet trade. Lenin Sosa, he's out of options. And Brandon Drury, the veteran guy on a minor league contract. What are your thoughts about the second base position battle going into camp?
It feels like Mydroth is somebody who earned the inside track based on how well he played at AAA Worcester last year. I think he had the year at AAA that you'd hope that Montgomery had, to where if he does look fine in spring training and he's the opening day second baseman, everybody says, yeah, I get it. Like, what would sending him down to Charlotte prove? Like, he might have to go down there. He might have to, continue to add strength because he just, doesn't hit the ball hard enough to change defenses and make them afraid of him. And so like that OBP in AAA is a mirage at the major league level. But I think he's a worthwhile experiment, assuming that he shows up in Glendale looking like the guy he was last year.
Any concerns about starting an all-rookie middle infield? Like, I don't recall the White Sox having done this recently or any major league team in a while to have a rookie shortstop and second baseman.
Yeah, I can't think off the top of my head, like one way or another. Like, I imagine there has to be, but no real concerns just because watching the veteran middle infield they drew last year with DeYoung and Lopez, and DeYoung looked bad at shortstop. So they thought they were getting certainty and they did not. Lopez was good at second base and okay at shortstop. So like he held up his end of the bargain. DeYoung did not. And so, I think at least give him a look. I do think it's a little bit odd that they didn't like sign that, Nick Ahmed type. I thought was somebody who might fill that bill. Defense first shortstop who could be somewhat of a mentor type, kind of like the Elvis Andrews from a couple years ago, where he can help provide some guidance along the middle infield. But if they're going into this with 2 rookies, at least the way they played last year, I think set the standards low enough to where if they look like if they're making messes in the middle infield, like, hey, what's different?
That's why I'm not going to discount the veteran Brandon Drury. Like, this kind of reminds me when the White Sox signed Robbie Grossman and had Robbie Grossman in the opening day roster and given him some playing time. Like, I feel like it's a bit of deja vu. Like, Brandon Drury could somehow be the opening day second baseman for the White Sox, cut in April, and then the Sporcle quiz in October, everybody forgets that Brandon Drury made 11 starts for the 2025 Chicago White Sox. Like, I just don't know if Will Venable really wants to go and start the season with an all-rookie middle infield with Montgomery and Mydroth, especially with young pitchers. So that's why I'm kind of hedging here. Like, Colson Montgomery, I think it's his job to lose at shortstop. At second base, as a betting man, I would put a wager on Brandon Drury winning this position battle, even though that does seem kind of odd and maybe not very productive when it comes to trying to figure out how this team's going to contend again.
Maybe I do wonder, like with Josh Rojas, and we'll see what, the White Sox have at third base. Josh Rojas might be that guy. He might be the veteran second baseman. Like if Miguel Vargas looks like the first choice at third base, then Rojas flexes over and he's that second base ballast. With Vargas being out of options, with Lenyn Sosa being out of options, I don't think, assuming they look useful or playable or like worth one more look in Chicago in April. I don't know if you can get carried away with bringing in veterans you don't have long-term plans for. If Sosa looks, anywhere close to what he did in September, and they seem invested in Vargas. So that's why I think and then that's one of the confusing things about Vargas. We'll get to him. But when you have those guys who are out of options, I'm not including Amaya in that group just because I think the White Sox brought him back with the hopes that they could sneak him through waivers at the end of spring training when every team is going through their own crunches and maybe they feel like it's more likely they can outright him at the end of spring training versus in the middle of winter. That's, I think, the purpose in bringing him back and putting him back on the 40-man roster, because they could use that glove first guy in the middle infield just to have in their depth chart somewhere. But between, I could see like if there's an injury, like if Maedroth doesn't look healthy, if, anywhere else like Vargas, Montgomery, Ball, like there are a few guys who can get hurt. So where like all of a sudden Rojas is needed every day at one position, then you do have that veteran middle infielder who can step in and provide, I guess, a little bit of a veteran bench help. But I think with the cluster of players that they have all healthy, some out of options, that probably limits just the number of permutations you can have somewhat, unless either disaster strikes or injury strikes sometime over the next month.
So moving over to third base, this is where I am pretty confident Josh Rojas is going to win the job, because I am not overly confident right now that Miguel Vargas is going to be able to show enough to impress the White Sox coaching staff to give him the job at third base. If he sticks with the team, might be a DH. And Ryan Ramos has one more option left, and I do think the White Sox activate it. Like, guessing right now before camp, between Rojas, Vargas, and Ramos, my money is on Rojas winning the opening day third base job, Jim. But it does put Vargas, and you mentioned Lenyn Sosa, in hot water standing with the White Sox and what their roles could be if they even have one.
Yeah, I mean, Rojas, he's a good third baseman. He does provide some lineup flexibility in terms of platooning at other positions, including Vargas at third, including Maedroth or Sosa at second. So like he could be the opening day second baseman, but if he's not, that's because he's the opening day third baseman. If not, he's the opening day second baseman, or they're facing a lefty. But I think you'll see him a lot in the mix at third. But I am really curious to see what Miguel Vargas looks like, both literally, given that he bulked up and he was wearing was he wearing a turtleneck at Sox Fest?
Turtleneck sweater underneath his.
Yep. So
jersey.
he might have been bulked up anyway. Even if he lost weight, he might have just been dressed for the weather and had some added heft up top. But just given what the White Sox traded for him and their best deadline chips for him, and given that he's out of options, it really seems like it could be such an unforced error if he shows up in spring training and just looks like he did last year. And what do you do with that? Do you just admit failure? Do you try to carry him on the roster? The one thing that just, I guess, keeps my mind open is that his exit velocities did fall off dramatically. Mm-hmm. So that's why I do think that fresh season, full off season of training, adding some muscle, not completely useless to the conversation, not the typical best shape of his life. He was in the worst shape of his life, when it comes to just his batted ball outputs last year. So regaining some of the energy he lost last year does make him different. I'm just wondering how different, especially when you factor in that he's not a great third baseman. But he does feel like it's a big off season for him and a big spring training for him. And also just by extension, a big off season and spring training for Chris Katz and whoever was, Josh Barfield or whoever it was that was saying Miguel Vargas is a good idea, because so far it seemed like a very bad one.
And what's also playing against Vargas, I'm not expecting him to win the job at third base, but even trying to be DH there are veteran options. Again, the White Sox gave guaranteed contracts to outfielders Mike Tauchman and Austin Slater. I am in the camp that they should be the starting left and right fielders for the Chicago White Sox next to Luis Robert, which then puts Andrew Benintendi, because of his albatross contract, as your DH. And that takes a spot away from Vargas. And I guess you could have Vargas as a bench bat that Venable could go to if he needs someone to pinch hit in the 8th or 9th inning to hope to run into a home run. But then again, you're really paying attention to exit velocities because he was not that guy last year for the White Sox. This is an uphill battle for Miguel Vargas, more so than Lenyn Sosa. Lenyn Sosa's looking at the cliffs of Dover, in my opinion, and trying to make this team. Lenyn Sosa is going to have to go Romy Gonzalez, where he's hitting like 11 home runs. He is leading the Arizona spring training in home runs in order to make this roster. Maybe as the White Sox starting first baseman. We'll see. But I know Jim would love that.
Big fan.
Suddenly the White Sox are trying to force guys to play first base. Right field has become the new first base. Oscar Colas is going to get time at first base. We'll see if Bobby Dahlbeck is someone to give a little challenge to Andrew Vaughn. But again, back to third base and Miguel Vargas, like this is a trade that could totally blow up. And if Vargas doesn't make the team, I could already hear, especially when we were at the Remova Theater for opening day eve, like how can any White Sox fan have any confidence in Chris Getz in a Luis Robert trade when he completely missed on possibly not only the Dylan Cease trade, especially if Drew Thorpe's not ready to go by opening day, but also the Eric Fetty and Michael Kopech trade. And I'm more optimistic about the Garrett Crochet trade and what the White Sox got back from the Boston Red Sox. But to go 1 for 3 in trying to rebuild this roster, trying to trade your best major leaguers, that's not a great hit rate, especially since your predecessor, that was the best work that Rick Hahn did in his tenure as general manager.
Yeah, he couldn't do anything else, but he was great at trading good players for good prospects. Yeah, and also like in this mix is Brian Ramos, who ordinarily would be, if not first in line, like he would be, you know, right alongside Josh Rojas. Yeah, Brian Ramos, if he has a good spring training, could break camp. And then like Josh Rojas is there as his caddy, providing some backup against tough right-handed pitching. I think Ramos has some gaps to close. He had a decent finish last year, but he's had some, you know, platoon split issues. He's had some, you know, holes in the zone, a little bit error prone at third base. I think he's a better third baseman than he's shown, but like he has some, you know, if he goes back to Charlotte, there will be some things for him to do there to show that he's ready for an audition or another shot at the White Sox. But I like Ramos based on what we saw last year, the Vargas we saw last year. Yeah. Ramos is way more interesting as a player than Vargas is. So I'm really, you know, like nothing against Vargas. Like it feels like he was thrown to a bad situation and then just played his worst ball. I hope for his sake that he shows up and looks like the Dodgers guy who got some chances with the Dodgers and just couldn't quite convert on him. Because like there's no reason to root against Miguel Vargas, but based on what he showed last year and who he might be getting in the way of, like if he's out of options and Lenyn Sosa's out of options and Sosa plays well and Vargas looks mediocre and Sosa played well last September and Vargas did not, and they stick with Vargas because of just how much they invested in him by trading Eric Fetty and Kopech and Pham for him. Not that I think Sosa is going to be like a great player anywhere else, but like he can be useful. He can hit some homers. Like, and the first base thing is half ironic to me and half like that might be his best position. Like he might offer enough defensively to be somebody who, like, if he hits like CJ Cron type, like he could be like a 25 homers, plays good defense, and for a team paying him $1 million, he could do worse. Like that's kind of where I think like Sosa's ultimate upside lies. And Vargas, just if he's struggling to hit the ball like over 100 miles per hour, even like when he squares it up, just there isn't a player there. So here's hoping Vargas shows up, is worth that audition, earns a spot, And, we're going into April saying, all right, let's see what he can do, because he's been this guy at the Dodgers before, and now he has less pressure to be on a winning team and just can figure it out himself, like, warts and all, versus somebody who just did not look like a major leaguer last year.
I was not expecting a Lenyn Sosa and CJ Cron comp, but there you go. That's what you get in this podcast episode getting into.
CJ Cron is my default option for like $2 million. First baseman could do worse. And I think that's like Lenyn Sosa's ultimate, if he does max out his skill set, is a could do worse guy for a team that, classic second division starter.
So my guess is right now, as players report to Glendale for spring training for the White Sox, I think the opening day infield is going to be Colson Montgomery at short. I have Josh Rojas starting at third. It's crazy, but I'm going to go with Brandon Drury starting at second base in that Robbie Grossman type of role. We'll see if he gets through April. And then Andrew Vaughn at first base. If you had to guess, Jim, what are your guesses at the infield?
So I'm trying to think of their opening day. What start are they facing opening day? Are you talking about like, I'm just thinking lefty righty.
Well, they're facing just in general. I mean, they're facing the Angels. Like, I have no idea who would be. Oh, it'd be Yusei Kikuchi. Kikuchi would probably be.
So it would not be Rojas opening day, theoretically, if you're talking about like platoons and such. So, but if you're talking about like, plan A, who will be receiving the bulk of the at-bats in the first like 2 weeks of the season, and not being pedantic about like specific opening day. It does feel like Rojas most of the time at third, but I would go Montgomery, Mydroth, and Vaughn unless, something happens, but that's kind of how it feels like. I'm hoping that if Montgomery doesn't look, just doesn't look ready, I do hope that Baldwin, assuming he's back from his wrist injury and is looking like he did last year, I do hope that they go with him instead of Montgomery, but we'll see.
While we get ready for the 2025 regular season, keep in mind our annual road trip, which will be on July 18th to the 20th in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, as we get a chance to watch the Chicago White Sox play against the Pittsburgh Pirates at PNC Park. We are co-hosting this event with our friends from the 108 and the Chicago Sports Bums, and you can currently buy your weekend package, the party package, to not only get tickets with us in our group at PNC Park, but we're also hosting a 2-hour pregame party at McFadden's Pittsburgh with unlimited select beers, well drinks, and there will also be snacks available. The Pirates are giving every ticket that is in our group a $10 concession credit. All this, so a game ticket and the pregame party is just $65 a person. You can purchase your Pittsburgh road trip #108 package on shop.soxmachine.com. Again, that is shop.soxmachine.com. And then the last position battle that is interesting, I mean, the bullpen's going to be revolving door. Like, we can skip the bullpen, revolving door. Many guys going to get save opportunities. That's just going to be a work in progress for the White Sox. On the starting front, this is what I have down, and I know we talked about this in a previous podcast episode, but guessing as far as starting rotation, Martin Perez, Bryce Wilson, I think the White Sox will give him an opportunity to start in 2025. Jonathan Cannon, Sean Burke, and Davis Martin. That's the rotation that I have because Drew Thorpe, again, reporting from Sox Fest, that he's had a setback in his recovery. I'm not expecting Drew Thorpe to be ready to start 2025. Eventually, he will join the rotation. But is that the way it's kind of working out with Jairo Iriarte, Jake Eater, and Kai Bush on the outside looking in, Jim?
Yeah, I think that's who I would go with. I think Bryce Wilson is probably the maybe at some point he gets knocked down to the bullpen and gives them length out of the bullpen. I think they would probably hope that Kai Bush takes over at some point, or Nick Nastrini looks better, or somebody comes knocking on the door. Thorpe, they're all healthy. I think in that case where they're, Bush looks like he looked like for the bulk of last year. Thorpe looks better than maybe Wilson gets knocked down, but I think Wilson right now, his value is being able to throw 5 innings and provide some measure of insulation from having to thrust a less than healthy Thorpe or a Bush who might have a little bit of refining to do in Charlotte, since he didn't quite look all the way. He didn't look 100% most of his time in Charlotte, where he still has a little bit of finishing to do. Nastrini, I think, somebody who, if he looks good, you'll know it. And if he looks like he did last year, you'll know it. Just he was so off. And so even at Charlotte, he had a hard time putting starts together. He had a hard time getting through 5 innings without walking 4 or 5 guys. Like if he's able to throw 3, 4, 5 innings as he builds up over the course of spring training and doesn't look like a complete wreck, maybe they say like, all right, you actually won it this time. Go for it. You don't have pneumonia at the end of spring training. You're going to be 100%. Give another shot. But if it's, if he looks like he's somebody who has one good inning and then next inning he throws like 6 of 30 pitches for strikes, then you're right back where he started and you're looking at a bullpen job for him. So he's like a little bit of a wild card here, where I think they'll move into the bullpen pretty quickly if it looks, like more of the same. But he's looked good enough in Charlotte recently enough, and he had the weird pneumonia thing where it just might have had a hard time getting untracked afterwards, to where maybe last year was lost. And you can he's not done yet, but I would definitely put him the outside looking in.
For the White Sox, the starting rotation, and during our spring training coverage, we'll have more breakdowns and previews as we inch closer to opening day in 2025. But a big number that dawned on me while doing research for this episode: with no Chris Flexen for the time being, Garrett Crochet traded to Boston, Eric Fedde with St. Louis, the 2025 White Sox have to find pitchers to cover their missing 427 innings from last year. Jonathan Cannon, in our projected starting rotation, is the only one for the White Sox that threw over 100 innings. So Martin Perez has got to eat into that total. Cannon's got to duplicate what he did. Hopefully Bryce Wilson can eat up 100 innings, or at least Sean Burke and Davis Martin can stay healthy enough to make up that gap. But again, that's kind of the alarming thing for a team that lost 121 games. Their top 3 starting pitchers are no longer on the roster. Somebody needs to step up and eat these innings, Jim. So that's why I like the starting pitching front, and back to the top storylines and how we started this podcast. I'm hoping that Brian Bannister can discover magic and hit on a couple of these guys. I'm rooting that it's more Sean Burke and Davis Martin than Martin Perez and Bryce Wilson, because if it's Martin Perez and Bryce Wilson, they're going to be gone in July. They're going to be traded, and then it's like, all right, well, who's left over in August and September as we try to get through the rest of the season?
Yeah, it's a big time for Davis Martin, I think specifically. I think Sean Burke has a little bit of room to take a step back, and he pitched so well in September that you imagine regression will set in, or the league will adjust, or he's just been erratic enough between shoulder issues and just being a big guy with spotty command at Maryland, to where you might have some rough stretches here. But I think Davis Martin, back from Tommy John surgery, fully healthy, has a new changeup. Seems to be a sponge for what Brian Bannister has to impart on him. That this would be the time for him to be somebody you don't really think about. Maybe not like a great starter, not like any team's number 2, but just somebody who can throw 160 innings without incident, and you feel okay about him being a starter even next year or 2 years down the road, because every team needs arms who can throw 160 innings.
Yeah, just don't embarrass yourself. That's the part right now for the White Sox. Don't embarrass yourselves in 2025. Those are the key position battles entering camp. Again, we'll be covering this as spring training goes along. James Fegan just texted us while we were recording. He is on the ground in Arizona. Chris Katz is speaking to the media on Tuesday. We'll have those quotes and reporting from James on SoxMachine.com. And as Jim mentioned, Keith Law will be joining the Sox Machine podcast later this week to discuss as far as his top prospect list for the Chicago White Sox and his thoughts about the farm system as well for the White Sox. Keith does not have high hopes right now for all of minor league baseball, and I can understand where he's coming from. So I can't wait for that sit down with Jim Margulis. And also a reminder, this upcoming Friday on Valentine's Day is college baseball opening day, which starts our coverage of following and tracking the 2025 Major League Baseball draft that I'll be doing weekly. Tons of content coming to you guys, and the podcast will be coming back twice a week as we get ready for opening day and covering another season of the Chicago White Sox in 2025. So thank you for sticking out the offseason with us. Jim, you and James did a fantastic job during Prospect Week. People are raving about the coverage, so congrats and terrific job. But we made it. We survived another White Sox offseason.
Yes, and the White Sox made it easy by just really allocating these little roster moves, like one a week, basically. Nothing of consequence, but like, hey, there's Matt Theis. Think about him for a couple days.
Yeah.
Austin Slater, Mike Tauchman, Martin Perez, Bryce Wilson, Rule 5 pick, Shane Smith, like just all these, the big move of consequence with Garrett Crochet, but and also Garrett Crochet traded at the winter meetings when we were there.
Yes.
Also a case of like, that was clutch because like that justified all of us being down there. So tip of the cap to Chris Katz. We'll see what he got in terms of talent, but in terms of timing, really helped us in the content minds not really have to scramble for things to write about.
Well, let's get ready to cover the team in depth throughout spring training as we gear up for the regular season. And also can't wait to see you guys, as mentioned earlier in the podcast, the opening day eve show at the Remova Theater, obviously the day before opening day in late March. Our best friend Jim Callis will be there. Courtney Finicum from Baseball Isn't Boring podcast will be there. And of course, our friends from the 108. So definitely grab your tickets right now, as we still have some remaining for our live podcast at the Remova Theater. Cannot wait. So thank you for sticking out another offseason with us. And now let's get ready to prepare for the 2025 regular season. You can subscribe to the Sox Machine podcast if you just discovered the show, or maybe you rediscovered it because football season is over and now you're trying to get back into the swing of things with baseball. You can subscribe to the Sox Machine podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You can also listen and watch the show on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine. We're on social media. We're on all the platforms at Sox Machine, including Blue Sky. You can follow James and I as well. Follow James Fegan at JR Fegan. You can follow me at Sox Machine Josh. If you want full access to all of our coverage of the Chicago White Sox, especially with James Fegan on the ground during spring training, you will need to be a Patreon member to gain access to his coverage down in spring training camp. To do that, go to patreon.com/Sox Machine to sign up. Monthly plans start at $5. We also have additional tiers of support at $10, $25, and also have a couple of spots open at our Veterans Committee as well. So if you really want to be part of the inner circle of Sox Machine and help support us, you have that opportunity as well. Again, go to patreon.com/Sox Machine, look over the options, and sign up today to help support us get through another season covering the Chicago White Sox. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're on for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.